What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about The Mummy. And as you guys can tell from the thumbnail and the title, I'm joined here in this video by my buddy BLACKTASTIC Media, one of the coolest and just smoothest guys here on YouTube. The guy has the greatest flow. I tell him all the time. I have no idea how he films his videos in one take without making mistakes or ever really seeming like he loses his train of thought. There's almost no cuts in his videos. And if you guys watch my videos, you know there's plenty of quick cuts because I make plenty of mistakes. So anyway, super happy to have him here in this video. We're going to hear from him in just a little bit to talk about this 2017 reboot of The Mummy starring none other than Tom Cruise. And when this movie was coming out, I was incredibly excited. You're going to hear both BLACKTASTIC and I talk a little bit about the whole thing that kind of led up to this movie and how this movie is not only a reboot of the Mummy franchise, but was also intended to be a launching point for what Universal was calling the Dark Universe. It was meant to be a universe of films that was going to combine all of the original Universal monsters, people like Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and so many others. And it was something I was definitely incredibly excited for. Not only did they work on this film and, you know, market this film, but leading up to it, they had already announced that it was going to be called the Dark Universe. They had already announced that they had already cast some people. They did a cast photo, including people like Johnny Depp, who was going to play the Invisible Man, which obviously we ended up getting an Invisible Man movie that is in no way connected to this Dark Universe. They also had Russell Crowe in this film as Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And they had also cast people like Javier Bardem to play Frankenstein's monster. There were so many others that they were already talking about. And yeah, this franchise just came to a close so quickly. Leading up to it, I was incredibly excited. Now, I haven't gotten around to reviewing all of the Universal horror monster films just yet, but I did review films like 1931 Dracula, the Frankenstein from the same year, I believe, and there's so many other Universal horror monster movies that I haven't gotten around to just yet, but I'm definitely excited to do so. But whenever they've made remakes or they've had different interpretations of these characters, I've always been very excited because I am a fan of this franchise. The overall Universal horror monster franchise is a huge reason that I love horror. It's a huge reason that I fell in love with movies, was these really larger than life characters that have gone on to just be iconic characters over the decades. And it's kind of crazy that within the next decade or so, we'll be within 100 years of the first Dracula film. I think Nosferatu came out within the 20s, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then you have Dracula that came out in the early 30s. So yeah, you know, about 100 years since a lot of these characters were first introduced, and it's wild. Now, The Mummy did come out a little bit later, the original Mummy with Boris Karloff. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of the ones with Brendan Fraser. If you guys have seen my reviews, I've done those already. I love the first two, and the third one I enjoy it, but it's definitely not as good as the first two. But yeah, I was definitely going into this movie with a lot of excitement. I love Tom Cruise. He's a great actor. He has a lot of charisma. He's got great chemistry usually with anybody he's in a cast with, and I usually know that he has a way of kind of like focusing the movie and working with the production team to make the best product. Now in this case, I feel like it worked against it. There's, you know, a lot of stories that came out about how Tom Cruise was trying to kind of manipulate the story and kind of like steer things in his own direction, trying to bring his own flavor to it. But then on top of that, you had these producers who wanted to set up for future films. You had the people who were already involved with the film. And this is a film that just feels like there was too many hands in the pot. There was too many people stirring the pot, and it just kind of came out a little bit messy. And though I will say right now, I do really enjoy this film, it's just not as good as I was hoping it would be. And it is sad that the universe ended up crumbling after this film. In my opinion, I feel like they gave up a little bit too early. I feel like they could have done something really, really cool with this Dark Universe. I would have loved to have seen a franchise that collaborated and brought all of these characters together in some sort of modern day badass way. We know we've gotten separate films here and there. You have the Benicio del Toro Wolfman film from earlier in the decade, or I want to say like, you know, earlier in the decade, we just started this decade, but I think it was like in the late 2000s, if I'm not mistaken, or right after the 2000s. You know, I've always enjoyed, for the most part, even if they're flawed, the remakes and the reboots, so I was excited to see what they would do here, but I just think that the biggest issue they had going into this movie was the fact that I feel like they just rushed the entire idea of a universe. This movie literally opens up with the traditional Universal logo, and then it spins around, and the universe and the world itself, the globe that they show at the beginning of the Universal logo, kind of gets all dark and decaying and nasty looking, and this logo comes up saying the Dark Universe. So right out of the gate, first movie, not even before the movie even starts, they're already putting the logo of this universe on there. And I think that they just kind of bit themselves in the butt just a little bit, because even the franchises that have done it really successfully, like Marvel, yeah, you know, they slowly built up to it. You know, they let Iron Man be an Iron Man movie, and at the end of the movie, in the post-credit scene, not even attached to the main bit of the movie, was a little Easter egg and kind of like a tease for what's to come. And each movie slowly got bigger and bigger and interconnected a little bit more, now to the point where you really don't want to miss any film in that franchise. But I think at the beginning, you have to start off slow. And you know, BLACKTASTIC said the same thing about MCU, and he said the same thing about DC. Same thing. You can't rush these things. You know what I mean? The movies have to be a movie on their own. If you want to have little Easter eggs and hints and nods here and there, sure, go for it. Like, there's a nice Easter egg in this film where you see the Book of the Dead, I believe is what it's called, which is from the first Mummy film with Brendan Fraser. And yeah, I was definitely excited about this movie going in, but it just feels like they had a lot of setup for future films and didn't have enough for this film to stand on its own. One of the things I really enjoyed about this film is the gender swap of the mummy. This time around, they decided to have a female mummy, which I thought was really cool. I enjoyed her backstory. I enjoyed what they did to kind of make her feel different from the previous versions of the mummy. She's played by Sofia Boutella, and I really enjoy her performance. She's got a great look. She's really cool in the role. She fits the makeup and everything, and I thought she was pretty solid in the movie. Again, I think the biggest issue is that she wasn't really given a whole lot to do other than be the mummy. Now, this movie isn't scary, and similar to the Brendan Fraser films, it's more of an action adventure kind of comedy kind of thing, mixed with some creepy visuals. There is one pretty creepy visual near the end of the film where a character is swimming underwater, and there's all these mummies following behind her in the water, and that's a pretty creepy visual. I really enjoyed the practical effects there, and I really enjoyed that scene. So outside of that, there really isn't too much that's necessarily scary about this film, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the film. It just is a film that's not necessarily scary, has some creepy parts in it, but I really did enjoy Sofia Boutella as the mummy. I think she plays the role very well. You got the love interest in this film played by Annabelle Wallis, and she was okay. I just feel like her character was kind of annoying and didn't have a whole lot to do. I didn't really find her relationship and connection with Tom Cruise's character to feel very real, but you know, for what it was, I enjoyed it. And then you have Jake Johnson in this film, who's, you know, known for comedic roles. I enjoy him in a lot of things. I really liked him in Into the Spider-Verse. I enjoyed seeing him in films like Ready Player One and in Jurassic World, and you know, he's great on TV. He's a funny actor. I think he's a good time. I think with me, my biggest issue was that sometimes this film was trying to be kind of creepy and a little bit more serious, even though there was some levity mixed throughout it. But his character and the role that he plays throughout it, with this kind of undead thing that he's got going on, yeah, it just kind of like took me out of certain sequences. I felt like it was trying to be funnier than it needed to be, and it was easily probably my least favorite part as far as the humor goes in this film. Now, before I give you guys my final thoughts on this movie, let's go ahead and hear what my buddy BLACKTASTIC Media had to say about this.
Hello there, subscribers and fans and viewers of the Anthony A. Perez channel. I am a guest here from BLACKTASTIC Media to talk about the 2017 The Mummy. This movie premiered June 9th, the summer of 2017, and boy, do we have a lot to discuss. First off, I'm a huge fan of the original series of The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser. Those were great. Number one, impeccable. Great movie. Two, superior. It was a close second to the first one. The third one took a misstep, probably waited too long to do it. Unfortunately, the wife changed. They had a new actress. Jet Li was the villain, protagonist, antagonist. Didn't like it. The third one, it had moments, but it felt out of place in the series, and they tried valiantly but failed miserably. Let's jump ahead of the future. Universal Pictures own the rights of all the famous monsters that we all know and love. The Mummy, Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, the Werewolf. They was thinking, we have our own franchise here. We have our own universe here. let's go ahead and bring it back to life. And to no fault of their own, Marvel was kicking ass, man. The new model of movies: build a universe, make subsequent movies over and over and over. They all interlink with each other, overlap to tell one gigantic, huge story. That's a model that's never been done before and probably never duplicated, because Universal tried it, failed miserably. Warner Brothers tried it with their universe with DC, didn't work. Wasn't received well. And anytime you do something from the ground level, you have to have earnest, heartfelt feelings and do it right. There has to be a plan. You can't jump into it because somebody else did it and was successful. Copycatting doesn't always work. The next best thing, and also the worst thing that happened to this film, was Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is one of 2 or 3 last movie stars left in Hollywood. People go to see a movie just on his namesake, Tom Cruise. He's such a big star, he changed the complexity of this whole movie, The Mummy. Although it was a retelling, a revamped, a reimagining of the original mummies, he brought a level of superstar power that the movie couldn't match. The director had a hard time because Tom Cruise has a lot of influence. He said, look, if I sign this contract, I'm gonna have a lot of say so. I'm bringing in my production team and it's gonna be a joint effort. That was a mistake. I really liked what Universal was shooting for. The whole dark universe thing, it was a laughing joke, but I liked the idea of a dark universe. They went about it wrong. Whenever you're building a universe, you can't announce it up front because now you're stuck. Just like some movies, like Power Rangers said we're doing 5 movies. You stick your foot in your mouth when the first one comes off the gate stumbling. And that's what happened here with The Mummy. They had all these other actors come in and actresses come in to make this universe. They were taking pictures, posing in all black. It was a great marketing strategy, so I thought it was. Around YouTube, it was a laughing act, and I thought that was kind of harsh. A lot of people on YouTube are big, gigantic Marvel and DC fans, so anybody else trying to do a universe was laughable. Well, I didn't think so. I thought it was a valiant effort. They just went about it wrong. Cost a lot of people jobs, and it's pretty sad what really happened. But here we go. The movie came out June 9th. And it was a decent movie. I had fun with this movie. It was cool. And marketing this movie was cool because leading up to that summer, I'm a huge Dallas Cowboy fan. Love the Dallas Cowboys. In that particular year, Dak Prescott, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, was a rookie. And man, he was kicking ass. With him having such a good year and having the best record in football that year, the Dallas Cowboys was on prime time every Sunday. And this particular Sunday night, I was watching the Dallas Cowboy game. And at halftime, they premiered the trailer for The Mummy. I remember seeing it going, whoa, whoa, the airplane scene and Tom Cruise yelling and doing flips with a homegirl on the plane. I'm like, man, this looks good. Months later, the trailer came out. You see all the little rats. You seen all the mummies and, well, not the mummies, but the mummy, which is a female. And then you had all these zombies. I seen Russell Crowe. I'm like, man, this looks great. Great idea, great concept. Probably too many people involved in the script and probably too many people involved in the production of this movie. The movie felt choppy. Too many voices trying to control the narrative, and the movie was extremely funny, which was by surprise. Tom Cruise is incredible in this movie, and I like the fact as a protagonist, he was an asshole. He wasn't a likable protagonist, which added a little intrigue to the movie. Sofia playing the mummy, Lord have mercy. Great choice. For one, the mummy was a female this time. I love her backstory. It was a great story. And so, let's face it, man, she's fine. And she's a former dancer. So she don't have to have a whole lot to say. She acts with her expressions and with her body, which is incredible. This movie have elements of the same Mummy movie that came before it. Took place in the desert, sandstorms with a face in the cloud. I'm like, I don't care if we did this before. Tom Cruise running. I thought I was watching a Mission Impossible movie again. His leading lady couldn't stand her. She was there as a damsel in distress. She served no purpose in this movie. His other sidekick, Mr. Jake, whatever his name is, dude's funny. Wasn't as funny as Tom Cruise in this movie, so he kind of got in the way too. Russell Crowe was great. This movie's old now, so he played Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. A little bit of spoiler there. He was fantastic. The only thing is, they had this scene in the movie where they was explaining the narrative, and he was talking to the screen more so than talking to Tom Cruise. It was obvious. And there's the problem with the movie. They're building a universe and not putting all their eggs into this one movie. I'll give you an example. Has somebody ever cooked dinner for you or made a cake or a pie, and they get the book out of ingredients, they get the recipe book out, they do everything to the T, the measurements, the amount, everything to the absolute T, and you eat the food or the dessert or whatever it is, and it's missing something. Though you look back at the recipe and like, no, everything's there. It's missing that to make it taste great. It's called love. Have a woman ever cooked for you before? And you go, man, this is really good because it was done with love. That's what this movie was lacking. This movie was made with a production team, director, producer, great studio, but it was missing the main ingredient, love. They did not put no love into this first picture. They were looking past this movie into the universe, and it's obvious. Fans are not stupid, and it felt like a setup film, a lot like Iron Man 2. And you get to the end, you're like, oh, I get it. But Iron Man 2 had a build-up. You had Iron Man, you had some other movies, The Incredible Hulk. It led up to the universe. So when Nick Fury appeared, you're like, oh shit, I get it now. This movie tried to do that, and it didn't work. It didn't work. Another thing going against this movie, the week before Wonder Woman came out, and nobody was sure how Wonder Woman was going to do. They were like, I don't know. Patty Jenkins, Gal Gadot is not a strong actress. And then you got Tom Cruise coming down the pipe. Man, Tom Cruise is gonna kill Wonder Woman the second week. Well, all the experienced critics and professionals got it wrong. Wonder Woman came out the blocks, rocking. Second week in a row, kicking ass. The Mummy got bitch slapped up and down the block by Wonder Woman. And then the whole thing fell apart. The whole universe was resting on the shoulders of one movie. Yes, you got Tom Cruise, you got that beautiful lady playing the Mummy, you got a decent cast, decent director. The visual effects, the CG is incredible in this movie. It looks beautiful. It was a rehash of the original Mummy. It felt like Indiana Jones meets a horror film meets this part comedy. The movie wasn't scary, and it was action setup. Action setup. The movie was just put together in a way to build and not deliver a serious movie. And that's the demise of this film. Though it wasn't bad, people wasn't fooled. And it came out at the wrong time. Maybe if it had a different release date and it went to #1, made some money, and had a strong second week, we would have had a universe. There would have been a dark universe, but man, box office numbers speak, and it came out the blocks flopping. And the movie looked like the original other Mummy movies. There was nothing different except Brandon Fraser was now played by Tom Cruise. And yeah. And this movie cost a lot of people jobs because they built a whole universe department for the dark universe at Universal. After the first week, they tore that shit down. People lost their jobs. That department was locked up. Posters were torn in half, thrown in the dumpster. All that marketing went to waste. It was over before it began. and really think about building a universe from the ground up. You don't announce you have a universe. You just let people discover it. And that was the demise of this film. Not a bad film, but to gauge it, I never bought it on Blu-ray. I don't own a copy of this movie. That's how I gauge movies. If I love it, I might want to own it. Even though physical media is coming to an end, people don't buy movies the way they used to. 3 years ago, I would have easily bought this movie if it would have delivered. But it would go down as a Tom Cruise movie that's good, that happens to have the mummy in it. That's how I look at this film. But without further ado, I'm gonna shut my mouth. You heard what I had to say. Now I'm gonna leave it to my man, Anthony A. Perez, to bring it home. Bases are loaded. He's about to hit a home run and bring everybody in. I'm out. Peace. And remember, if I offend you, then you don't understand me. But if I inspire you, you will learn to love me. I'm out. It's just my point of view.
As usual, a big thanks to my buddy BLACKTASTIC Media for being here in this video. Loved hearing what you had to say. And again, guys, isn't he just so smooth? That flow. He literally didn't make a mistake not one time, and he had no cuts in that video. I have no idea how he does it. But yeah, man, I loved hearing what you had to say. And it sounds like we're pretty much on the same level here, right? You have this franchise that sounds pretty cool. It sounds like it could be pretty awesome. And I was also really surprised to see that there was this kind of mass kind of jokiness about it. People were just kind of joking on it and making fun of it before it even started, which is, you know, I hate that, because that's what I hate about the current world of film criticism, and not only from film critics, but, you know, just people in general, just people online, people that watch movies casually. There's people that kind of go at things with a cynical perspective, or when they choose to watch something, they just want to rip into it. And though I love watching movies, poking fun at things, and having a good time with it, I think that when you just decide to just shit on things, it kind of takes away from, you know, what can be really cool. And I think when I watched this movie, it's got great performances, great special effects, it's got a great cast on it overall. Everybody looks and fits the part really, really well, and there's some really cool world building in here. The biggest issues, though, are that the narrative feels a little jumbled. There isn't a whole lot to be completely gripped onto, and it kind of feels like they leave things in a very weird place. I think what they chose to do with Tom Cruise's character at the end of the film is you're either gonna like it or you're not gonna like it. And I enjoyed it, and I was definitely interested in seeing what the future films would be like. But yeah, you know, it's definitely a bummer that they decided to can this whole franchise already. We've already gotten an Invisible Man movie that, you know, is its own thing and is separate from this, so the whole dark universe has just gone to shit, and it sucks, because I watched this movie in theaters and I had a good time with it. I did not believe that the super negative criticism that I was hearing was well deserved. I felt like the film was fun. I had a good time with it. It was silly, and it had a lot of action. It had a lot of great moments, and it felt like, you know, a mummy film. It felt like a fun mummy film. It's easily not one of the worst mummy films. There are mummy films that I feel are worse, especially some of the older films. And, you know, the idea of them collaborating in this universe would have been really fun. Now, I did mention that Russell Crowe's in this film as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and his role in this film is essentially kind of like setting up a Nick Fury-esque character. He's got this institute where he essentially, in this area, this lab that he has, this secret facility. Inside of there, they show stuff like in jars. He has like an arm of a creature from the Black Lagoon, or he has you know, a skull that has like vampire fangs. So little things like that that kind of are trying to expand the universe and show that here's this guy who already knows about these creatures and monsters, and he's trying to pull certain people in to kind of help him, you know, take down some of this evil and these evil creatures altogether, which I thought was really, really cool. I like the idea of this facility, this secret organization that already knows about these monsters. I just think that they jumped the gun. You know, the movie is called The Mummy, and there's a lot of the time in this film that is not really focused on the mummy element of the film. Now, the mummy is involved with what's happening there in that facility, but at the same time, again, it kind of feels kind of like what BLACKTASTIC said, that he's kind of talking to the audience. It feels like a lot of exposition-heavy world building, rather than letting this movie be its own thing. So yeah, guys, that's gonna be my thoughts here on The Mummy 2017. I think it's a good movie. I do recommend it, and I think the biggest bummer going back and rewatching it now on Blu-ray was the fact that it just is a movie that has so much setup for really cool things, and though that may kind of tarnish the story in its own, maybe it kind of takes away from what this movie could have been by setting up things so much, I think it's still really cool. I think there's a lot about this film that was really, really well done. It does feel a little messy in some of the story elements, but it is a fun film, and I think that if you're a fan of the Mummy franchise and you haven't checked this out, I highly recommend it. Get your own opinion on it. I think that if you've heard people kind of shit on it, I think it's definitely worth checking out yourself. There's a lot of fun to be had with this movie, but I think the one thing that a lot of people can probably walk away with this movie agreeing on was the fact that this film just spent too much time setting up for things that are never going to be paid off. And I think that when you watch this movie, similar to some other movies that, you know, get started and they leave you with a cliffhanger or they leave you with open ends and then they never make sequels, it just is a detriment on the film to have so many open endings or to have so many things that were unanswered, you know? So, yeah, guys, that's going to be my thoughts. As usual, you guys can find the link to BLACKTASTIC's channel down below in the description box. Go give them some love. Let them know that I sent you. Big thanks to BLACKTASTIC for being here in this video with me to talk about The Mummy. I'm excited to talk about some more Universal horror monster movies. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button, comment your thoughts down below. And as usual, you guys can catch me in the next one. Bye-bye.